Hello, good evening, and welcome to 2020 Vision. I'm Jenny Fisher, the editor of East London News, and the host of the programme. And today we're going to be mostly talking about parking in Tower Hamlets and some new rules that have crept up on us. And our guest today is Cllr Andrew Wood of Canary Wharf. So welcome, Andrew, to the programme. And as I say, soon we'll be talking about parking. I don't know, dear listener, if you're happy to give up your car because it's going to be such a hassle parking it, or not very much that you can do with it in Tower Hamlets, have a think about it. And we do welcome your calls. So ring in and ask some questions. Be surprised. Cllr Wood actually knows quite a lot about a lot of things. So ring in and ask him about parking or anything else. The number is 020 8 12345 07 0208 12345 07. But remember, if you do phone in, and you're very welcome to do so, you must turn off the device on which, or sound on the device you've been listening to us on, your phone or your laptop. Otherwise, we'll hear ourselves back again, and that won't work. So just mute or move yourself to another room, and ring us on that number. So welcome, Andrew. But before we get on to the parking thing, we must have a nod to today's news and say how sorry we are to hear of the explosion in Beirut over in Lebanon and the loss of life and what seems like a massive toll of injuries. People going into what seems to be quite a health system that's finding it very, very difficult to cope with the number of those injured. So our thoughts are very much with those people as well, and perhaps put our problems into a little bit of perspective. I know, Andrew, you've lived in the Middle East as well. I don't know if you've been to Beirut, if you know that area.
I have. I went to Beirut in 2002. It was a really interesting and beautiful city. And it's the pictures we saw earlier tonight were really shocking. And we know Lebanon is already in crisis economically, and this really doesn't help at all. So I hope the international community will step in and help where they can.
Yes, I think the Prime Minister, has already appealed for help, which is good, isn't it? Because a lot of people sometimes try on their own first. But yes, thank you for that, Andrew. We can only hope that the help comes in. So let's now go on to parking, and there's all of a sudden there was a little page on the Tower Hamlets website told us that there's going to be some changes. Can you tell us, Andrew, what's afoot? I know the borough's divided into zones, and each of the 4 zones has got a number of mini zones. And I must admit, I wasn't actually sure what the previous regulations were. So can you let us know what you think has changed and what's going on?
Well, it was very confusing, and I was also confused the first half an hour when I saw the website, because it also had no earlier indication. I just saw something on social media saying there was a change to the regulations from the 1st of September. I had a look, and I think actually I probably misunderstood it the first time I read it. But what it basically means is, if I give you an example, say, for example, on the Isle of Dogs, where I am now, it's covered by Zone D, but it's broken down into zones D1 and D2. And today, and in previous months and years, I could park either in D1 or D2 for the whole day. Didn't matter. But from the 1st of September, I'll only be able to park in the zone where I actually belong. So I live in D2, so I can only park in D2 for the whole day. And if I go to D1, then I can only park there for a maximum of 3 hours. And that's the same rule that we had for previous zones. So previously I could go to other zones and only be able to park there for 3 hours. So the real issue is especially going to affect those people who live on the boundaries between zones, because you will have some streets split in where one side is D1 and one side is D2, and without clear communication, I think a lot of people in September are at risk of getting parking tickets without realising the reasons why.
Good. Well, just as well we're starting to publicise it, but I think we are in a position to show the little announcement on the website, if we could see that now. Yes, there we are. That's it wasn't a very big announcement, and it was hidden away on one of the pages. So have you got any idea why they did this, Andrew? What actually prompted them? Thank you.
No, because part of the problem is that this hasn't been discussed in any meeting that I'm aware of. It wasn't any advanced communication. So the first time I was aware of it was by looking at exactly what you're seeing on screen now, which is changed to the council website. So subsequently, a couple of days ago, we did get an internal council email to the councillors that talked about this change. But that was after we know the mayor, and lots of people have been emailing into the mayor and to councillors complaining about this. So whether that prompted the email to councillors, which included other things or not, I just don't know. My understanding is a letter was also delivered recently to residents as well, but one person who saw the letter didn't understand what it said.
A letter came out to residents about the parking?
So that's what I've been told by one person, and I'm trying to find out who else got this letter, because one of the things I'm asking for is actually we don't make these kind of changes until we have written to all permit holders, making very clear what's happening, what's changed, answering some of the questions out there, and also having the map of the mini zones. Because if you don't see the map of the mini zones, this may be quite hard to understand or to interpret.
Well, absolutely. It just seems a very odd way of going about things. We've got over 300,000 residents. Now, to have to write them a letter every time we've got something new to say just seems very odd. As you say, perhaps it wasn't all the residents, although obviously all the residents have got something of a say. So the process seems to be deficient. Do you think the mayor actually knew about... Sorry if I don't know if anyone can hear. I was talking to Andrew just before the programme about how many police sirens there are on the Isle of Dogs these days, and they're whistling past my window. I don't know if they're coming through on the programme. Yes, do you think the mayor knew that the changes had taken place, or were they slipped in without him knowing, do you think?
So I don't know. All I can say is it didn't go through any official channels. So typically, if the mayor makes a decision, he makes it in cabinet, papers are circulated in advance, there's opportunities to ask questions. So none of that happened. So I just don't know. It is possible, because there have been a few occasions when the mayor, finds out about something afterwards. So it is possible that he didn't know about this at the time. And
one of the reasons why you've come on tonight, I think, is because you've actually put some sort of petition to the council calling for a rethink. It's an approach we're sort of getting into the habit of, really, with the council. But tell us about your petition, Andrew, what you've done there.
So the petition isn't live yet, because I decided to do it via the Tower Hamlets Council e-petition process. So the downside of that is that I submit it and it has to be cleared. So I sent an email this morning asking what the delay is. So I'm hoping that will get cleared soon and I can publicize it. But basically, it's asking for a number of things. So the first point is that don't implement this change without actually writing with the maps to all of the permit holders in Tower Hamlet. So that's step one, so at least they know what is going on. Step two of my original petition was kind of saying that there should be a public meeting at Tower Hamlets Council, maybe a cabinet meeting, for example, where there is an opportunity to ask some questions in public about this change, because I'm still uncertain about a couple of issues, and that would give other people, other councillors, the same opportunity. And then my sort of wider point is that, I've been a councillor for 6 years. I don't ever remember at any council meeting a really detailed discussion about parking policy and about the enormous changes happening to Tower Hamlets Council and the area more generally, and about the issue of cars. I mean, there's been a few complaints about, Poplar Harker increasing the charging, and all of that, but not really a proper debate about the issues. And I think rather than making these incremental, minor changes, which actually add up to quite a lot when you add them all up, let's have a proper debate, because actually there are a lot of issues that we did discuss about parking. And then after I sort of did that, another councillor then sent me some suggested changes. So they suggested that we should be doing an equality impact assessment, and just also highlighting, the impact, that some people are dependent on their cars. And I accepted those changes. So hopefully the final petition will be a joint effort between me and another Labour councillor. All
right. That's a cross-party approach. That would be nice. I don't know if I can find it now. I probably can't, because I've closed down a lot of things on my computer to try and minimise incidental noise. But one of the things I did when this came up as an issue, Andrew, was I went back and checked the 2018 Labour Party mayoral manifesto to see what that said about parking, what they had promised, and it's not. It's a fairly long manifesto. It's something like 20 pages, and they don't really mention parking. There's quite a few references to parks, but of course that's sort of grassy areas, not really parking. And the only thing I could find was the sentence, "We want to make it harder for commuters to use our borough as a car park," which is fair enough, and that's been, and not original either. And then it goes on, "While letting local people go about their lives, recognising that for many carers and workers, a car or other vehicle is a necessary part of life." So in the manifesto, there is that recognition that some of the residents do need cars. But the rest of the manifesto, it picks up two issues which are important, one of which is clean air, and it makes a number of promises about keeping vehicles away from the immediate area of local schools. And the other thing, of course, is cycling and promoting that. And there's a lot in the manifesto about increasing making life easier for cyclists. So that's, but that was all. So this review is not really something that I understand. Have you any idea what they're why this arose, what they think the benefit will be?
So there may be two possibilities. So one of which is, in some areas there is enormous parking pressure, and it's just getting worse and worse. And the Isle of Dogs is one good example of that, especially with people living in car-free developments actually having cars. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this proper debate about parking issues, because we've never really talked about the people in car-free developments with cars and what do we do with those people and the sort of issues that causes. So I think that's one part of it, trying to find a solution to it. I'm not sure this is the right solution. And the other part of it may well be is that, we lost £4.5 million of parking income because of COVID and changes to that. And the council will be wanting to recoup some of that money. So the cynic in me might suggest that, making parking more complicated means there's more opportunity to find people for parking in the wrong place in the future months and years. That probably isn't the reason, but I don't know, because again, this has just come out of the blue and it hasn't been debated in any way.
Yes, that's I understand that with COVID, I think I understand maybe there weren't as many people coming and parking illegally and getting fined because there just wasn't as much transport going on. I think I understand that. But did you make some reference to, or no, it wasn't you, maybe, I think it was somebody else, made some reference to a lot of parking tickets having to be withdrawn or refunded or some sort of issue? Are you aware of that at all?
Yeah, so there's two issues. So I know obviously during COVID, we were allowing people, so again, people in car-free developments who normally get in their cars and drive to work, 8:29 a.m. weren't able to do that anymore. So I know that people were getting exemptions from, as long as they parked in a safe place in a proper car parking bay, they weren't going to get ticketed. And if they did, then they could apply for a refund. So I assume that's what you're referring to. But this sort of related issue to all of this stuff is obviously at the end of last year is the council changed their systems, their parking systems, to an online process. So no more paper tickets, no more things to put in your window. Everything is now virtual, and there have been lots and lots of teething problems to that. And I've been making some casework on it. So the volume of work I had to do on parking issues and the technicality of paying in the first 6 years of being a councillor were like that, not very much. And suddenly in the last 6, 7, 8 months, it's jumped enormously because of some of those teething problems. And they had systems issues as well last year, which took a while to sort out. So I think those are the two reasons. And obviously fewer visitors, so less income from car parking bays. issuing, lots of permits to NHS staff to be able to park for free. So all of that had an impact on their parking income, and a fewer fines.
Right. Well, you see how knowledgeable Councillor Woods is about all these parking issues, probably thanks to having to do quite so much work with all the various queries. But if you do have a question for him, ring into the studio on 0208 1234507. He'll come straight through to us, and you can ask him a question or give him the benefit of your opinion if you maybe think his petition is ill-founded or whatever. I know another issue, of course, is obviously parking for residents is very important, but key worker parking is something else which I think is really quite confused. I drew a deep breath and looked at that council website earlier on today, and I found a statement saying that the borough does want to give key workers parking, ease of parking in the borough, because obviously many of them are trying to keep away from public transport, and that generally is still a good thing. But I do know of a local school where the council advised the school, the parking departments advised the school that they had applied for some key worker permits, and they were told that the teachers applied for had been put on the white list, which seems seemingly inappropriate terminology for Tower Hamlets to use, really, but was also utterly meaningless. Oh, great, we're on the white list, whatever that is. And apparently that meant that the cars had virtual permits, but they weren't actually able to explain that clearly enough. So that was a problem. For schools, although the website says that people who work in schools are still key workers, the permits didn't work in the holidays, although schools do work in the holidays, and they're stopping from September. That's another thing that's stopping from September. So maybe that's another thing for you to take up is the use for key workers.
That's actually on my petition. It's one of the items in the consultation that we need to have this proper debate. One of the things I put on there, it's probably going to get lost down the bottom, is how long temporary COVID parking permits should be made available for.
Well, they're gone.
And what do we mean by key worker? Because that's been one of the other things I've had to do a bit of work on. What do we mean by key workers? Because they were, for example, like some TfL staff that had to open up Wapping Overground Station first thing in the morning and close it late at night, needed a car because obviously they couldn't travel on public transport, and they were being refused these permits, for example, at the beginning. So
absolutely, I mean that really is a problem, isn't it? The antisocial hours that workers have to work. I remember a friend of mine who worked on the rail used to go through intricate measures of catching goods trains. He worked in signal box. I think back in the day when they still had signal boxes. I'm not sure they do now. I think it's all done from the control room, but it was quite a process getting out to a signal box when there wasn't in order to open the system so the trains could run. It was quite a process. So you've mentioned, that the Isle of Dogs is sort of particularly hard hit by this, I suppose, because of the increase in population density.
That's one reason. Another issue we've got is car clubs. So car clubs used to only be able to park in designated parking spots, and they can now park in any residential, place that they want to. So the problem that we had pre-COVID is we'd have lots of people working at Canary Wharf who wanted access to a car club, is they would put the vehicles obviously close to Canary Wharf, which is the Isle of Dogs and Poplar. So we had, on some streets, a lot of car club vehicles parked. And one of the things we were trying to find out was, were those vehicles serving the local residential market, or were they serving the workforce at Canary Wharf? Probably much less of an issue now, but it was that competition between the car clubs, taxis, residents, and lots of other people who wanted to park in this area, and yes, mainly the residential population increasing. And in particular, our problem isn't so much daytime, it's evening at weekends, because of the car-free developments, lots and lots of people having cars, even though they've signed, agreements saying that they won't have a car in those properties. So
So basically, if the controlled parking zone, the CPZ, only operates between 8:30 and 5:30, which is fairly reasonable,
Yeah.
All these people in car-free developments are bringing their cars in between 5:30 and 8:30.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I must say that my experience hasn't quite. Has my experience been that? I'm not sure. No, I think maybe it has because, as you know, Andrew, I live on the Samuda estate, and there we had the charmingly incompetent One Housing Group trying to regulate parking on the estate, and they were going on about, we definitely needed a permit system. We used to not have any permits, and it was difficult to park. And One Housing Group kept saying, look how the place is full during the day, and indeed sometimes it was, but it was the evenings. You're right, it was the evenings that were the most difficult, and that wasn't commuters. So One Housing Group said, you've got all these commuters parking on your estate during the day, and really we didn't. And it was that's an interesting. I hadn't thought about where those cars came from, and then there was the fuss up at. Round what's it called, New Providence Wharf, is it? I can't keep up with all these new names. There's just too many of them. Where there was the great issue of how many yellow lines were painted on the road, wasn't there, and how long people could park there. Anyway, we're I don't know if we're entertaining the rest of the borough with that. Do you get the impression that parking is also an issue in other parts of the borough? I was getting a bit worried about Whitechapel and whether with the development that's supposed to be going on there, that's going to be having parking problems as well.
Yeah, and also you also got quite crowded streets anyway. To give you some idea of the numbers, so there are approximately 45,000 vehicles registered to owners in Tower Hamlets. If I remember correctly, I think the total number of street parking spaces on Tower Hamlets roads is about 30,000 spaces. But you've then got private car parks and estate car parks, which is where the other, 10, 15,000 people sort of then park. So where I live, for example, we have private car park downstairs where I park. So I don't have a Tower Hamlets Council parking permit, except for the fact that I'm a councillor and therefore I've got it, but I didn't have one previously. And yes, there are obviously pressures in parts of the borough, and they will just get worse the more car-free developments are built in those areas. Because I think the council operate in this assumption that the people who live in those buildings are all, middle-class professionals working in offices and don't need cars. Whereas in reality, a lot of people living in affordable housing, do have children. They've got elderly parents who may be a bit housebound, can't get on public transport very easily. May have jobs that require them to travel or to carry tools, or they may be public hire vehicle drivers. So the reality, and this is one of the problems that we have, is we actually have very little data about who drives a car in Tower Hamlets and why they drive a car, and whether those reasons are justifiable or not. And in some cases, clearly, in some of my use of cars is, it's because I'm so busy, I just never have the time. So sometimes I do drive a car when it's completely inappropriate to do so. But there are other people I know who do have appropriate reasons to drive a car. And I don't think we've fully identified all of those different groups to try and work out what the real underlying demand for cars is and whether it's justifiable or not. Yes,
I mean, I think shopping is another issue. I mean, I remember, again, going back a while, before I had a car, and I had a small child at the time, and a large pram or a large buggy that went with the small child. And so I used to walk to Asda, we're very close to it, and pick up my shopping and put it all on the pram. And I had quite a system, and I could get about 11 carrier bags of the old-fashioned variety on the one pram, and that was. But sometimes I'd have to go to Asda twice in the weekend. So your weekend would be trips to the supermarket. And I suppose we're supposed to replace that now with having shopping delivered by the supermarket. Which is all very well, but it's not the same if you're sort of trying to pop round, to your friends or to your relatives. With shopping you've done for them, or shopping that was in your delivery that was for them, and we're not all up to carrying it around or wanting to be seen out with a pram, which would raise all sorts of odd questions. And I think it's a safety issue as well. I remember the first time I got into a car when I was 18 and drove off, and the sense of freedom. You could just go where you wanted, exactly where you wanted to, under your own. I mean, you couldn't, of course, go exactly where you wanted to, under your own steam, because awful things happen, like breaking down and things like that. But just a sense of freedom, and certainly living in Tower Hamlets with a car, I found as a woman going out, if I want to go out until late in the evening, being able to just pop up to Whitechapel, pop over to Bethnal Green or something, park somewhere and get out and get into a car and probably give people lifts home. It's just so much more freeing than having to wait, alone at a sort of D6 bus stop or something. It just feels that much safer. So anyway, it seems that the good burghers of Tower Hamlets are just so impressed by your knowledge, Andrew, that they have no questions for you. They are a shy lot, though. They don't. They don't like to ring in. So there we are. Perhaps while you're there, though, as you are the councillor for Canary Wharf, I know that doesn't actually mean councillor for the business district, but I was just wondering if you had any impression of how the economics of Canary Wharf are going. I mean, we've relied a lot on there being jobs at Canary Wharf, and I don't know how. I haven't been up to Canary Wharf myself since the lockdown started, so I don't know if that's getting populated again, if the local cafes are doing any business, or what's going on there. What's your impression?
So it's deeply worrying, because I don't think people realise how dependent we are on business rates income from Canary Wharf. So a lot of the council funding is, especially in the last few years, has come from business rates and our share of the growth in business rates, and that has been an upward trajectory in recent years. And I'm so very worried that will come to an end and may decline, in which case, the council has always cried wolf about their finances to some extent. Yes, there have been government cutbacks in terms of their core grants. That's absolutely true. But what they don't really talk about is the growth of council tax income and the growth of business rates and new homes bonus, which they very
Let me just interrupt you for a second. I think we have a caller coming through, Andrew. Hello, caller. What's your name?
Hi, Andrew. Hi, Jenny. It's Peru here. Just want to raise. I don't know whether Andrew's raised it or not. I know that I've received phone calls about the proposed parking changes. I think one of the issues is that we have a very large working class community here, and they still have intergenerational families living in the borough. Many of them who are quite old, and the COVID-19 epidemic has shown that how these older residents are reliant on family members for care, especially shopping, etc. And it just seems that there seems to be a lack of awareness about this support network that has been a traditional feature of people living in the East End of London. And I just want to, I know this is featured, I think, in the petition, Andrew. Have you had any phone calls having the same concerns that I've had?
So we discussed part of that briefly earlier on, especially the quality impact section of the petition as well. We've just been talking about, why people need to use cars, and young children, and kind of all of the rest of it. So I've had quite a few emails from people, expressing their concerns about this change and worry. But the whole point of the petition is also asking, for public meetings so we can talk about these issues. And the point of the consultation, again, is to talk about these issues and understand, why people do need cars, occasionally, and need access to them. They don't really understand what the drivers are for car use in the borough.
If we could just make it clear to listeners, we're getting a call here from Councillor Puru Mir of Mile End. There's possibly a little bit of noise on your line, Puru, but we'll try to persevere. I hope you're not if you're listening to the program, I had no idea you listened, but if you're listening to the program, if you could just make sure you haven't got any device on that's broadcasting it as well. But isn't that a bit of a contradiction, Puru, that if in the borough we still have a lot of families living together with intergenerational members, that's young children and older relatives, then they don't need ferrying about. So what do you see as the issue?
To clarify that point, Jenny, it's not living together. What you're having is, because of the housing crisis, we've got families, several generations, but living in different households, and especially the elder generation, they're living on their own, and they're relying on the younger generation for support, so to speak, with their shopping, etc., care as well. And that's why it's really important that people in the borough are allowed to park wherever they are, not restricted to the zones, because they're actually carers as well. They might not be official carers, but a lot of our elderly residents are reliant on that family network for support. That's the feedback I've had, and I've seen it with the COVID-19 lockdown, that a lot of elderly residents were relying on the extended family for support, and to keep an eye on them, etc. And especially when we're going into a second lockdown, I don't think it's wise to bring in these parking changes where a lot of the elderly residents are relying on extended family support. They're not living together, but they're still living in the borough, and they're relying on that support in terms of bringing trips to the hospital or trips to the surgery.
Puru, you were saying when there's a second lockdown, you don't know anything that we don't do. That's if there's a second lockdown, isn't it?
I think I've had conversations with the health professionals in Royal London Barts, the epidemiological unit, and they're looking at the modelling, so to speak, and it looks like we will have a second wave, and their model shows that it's going to be much worse than the first wave that we've just come out of, especially in the winter when we're going to have additional pressures on the health service. So I think it's inevitable that we're going to go into a lockdown in the winter, especially Tower Hamlets is one of those high risk areas, and you've seen in northern towns that they're already in the lockdown, and given sort of like the kind of employment a large majority of our residents are in, which are sort of like low paid, sort of like public facing employment, either as cabbies or bus drivers or frontline staff, it's inevitable that the infection rate would go up and we would go into a lockdown. I think Tower Hamlets is one of those high risk areas, just like those northern towns, and I think it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we go into a lockdown.
Okay, well, you heard it here first, dear listener and dear viewer. So we may need a little bit of corroboration. So I couldn't let you go, Puru, just without sort of coming back a bit of a cheeky question here. As you know, Unison have today announced they're going to take
questions from you, Jenny.
They're going to take another 3 days of strike action against these Tower rewards contracts. And I did see that you hadn't actually signed the open letter by some of the councillors who were asking the mayor to reconsider the Tower rewards approach. Just wondering if maybe you'd had second thoughts and might be able to sign it now, join the picket line.
I did sign a letter. So the letter that was published in the East London Advertiser was a leaked, inaccurate letter. That's all I can say. But I did sign the letter.
You signed it? Oh, right. You did sign the letter that was in the Advertiser.
No, the East London Advertiser actually published an incorrect information.
Ah, well, I couldn't possibly comment on the accuracy or otherwise of that, but maybe if you'd...
I did sign a letter with other councillors.
You signed a letter?
That's all I can... Yeah.
So you'll be on the picket line next week?
What it is the Labour Party has specific rules against councillors in terms of public gatherings, and we don't want to fall foul of those standing orders and directions from the regional director. So I'm with my mother who's shielding. I'm just visiting her outside of London.
So that's all right. There's a virtual picket line, Paul. You don't have to be there in person. You can join the virtual picket line. So look,
I'm happy to join that. Jenny, I'm actually visiting my mother. So that's I've made that clear to residents. So I'm away from London for a few weeks.
No problem. Well, I'll get Unison to send you details of the virtual picket line, or I might do it myself if I get them from the union.
Well,
and you can.
Jenny, I've worked closely with Unison on this issue, and the Unison branch officials can confirm that. So
that's fine. That's fine.
Whatever details they can. All right, then.
It's just that your name was missing from the advertiser, so it's good that we've had a chance to correct the record. It's delightful. I'll send you details of the picket line, and you can send me details of the letter, and we'll correct that in public for you. That'll be lovely. And thank you for enhancing Andrew's points about parking.
Gabby, who actually forwarded the letter herself, so you can get the letter of Gabby, and it's dated and corrected. So Gabby can give
fantastic. That's good. Okay, look, we're going to have to let you go now. But thank you for phoning in, and don't be a stranger. Phone in again. So thank you for that. Right, and Andrew, that's a good point there about the family need. I think, though, that with the various community groups that have grown up over the lockdown period, it actually goes a bit beyond families as well, doesn't it? Because there's been so many, I can't name names, but I do know so many sort of almost comedy carloads that have sort of been packed up with various boxes and so forth and lists of addresses and have gone out to deliver. Yeah. And when you've got sort of like a driver and a delivery person, and it's during the lockdown, you've got parking restrictions being eased, then I imagine the deliveries have been a bit easier. But if that parking comes back, the need hasn't gone away, has it? And there's still a lot of community assistance going on. So that could be another thing that older people or more vulnerable people rely on.
Yeah, but if we have a second lockdown, I expect, like the first lockdown, that there will be a relaxation of parking rules anyway. So it's entirely possible if Councillor Meir is right that we sort of change the rules and then sort of unloosen them again. So I mean, I do check the COVID stats in Tower Hamlets every 2 or 3 days. There's a really good local government association website where they report the cases reported each day. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on that. And the numbers are low in Tower Hamlets, but they're still there. We're averaging between 2 and 5 cases a day approximately over the last couple of weeks. So as we've seen elsewhere in the north, it's entirely possible that those could mushroom.
Okay, well, I'm not going to. I'm not trying to ambush you at all, Andrew. But while we're on the topic of community help, I did see, and we've reported it in East London News, that quite a well-known community group locally, the Neighbours in Poplar group, which operates slightly not in your patch, but very close to it. Yeah. At the top of the island in the Poplar area, South Poplar area, they've begun another petition, on the Change website, and that's calling on the council to restore the Meals on Wheels service. I don't think Neighbours in Poplar have had any public funding to help with the, I think it's 5,000 meals they've distributed, and I don't know how many food packs. Similarly, I mean, on the island, there's a group called the Island Network, and they've been distributing food and meals. And I think they've done over 3,000 food packs and uncounted meals. And they've not had any public funding. They've had a bit of local business funding and some support from the mosques. So I think Neighbours in Poplar is trying to say, well, look, we've found through our experience that providing meals, providing food parcels, has been incredibly valuable, mostly just because it's, for some people, the only way they're going to get a hot meal. It helps the nutrition, which is important at a health time of, health crisis. And again, it's that human contact. I mean, not everybody has daily post any longer, or we used to have the milkman, didn't we, who would be able to spot if milk hadn't been taken in and if there was a problem. And I suppose now those community groups are important. So Neighbours in Poplar are saying, well, look, let's not just leave it to people in the community to help each other out. Let's get some proper council-funded Meals on Wheels service back so that people can get that again. I don't know if that's a petition you would support, Andrew, if you feel that's a good idea or not.
So yes, I do. So just to point out, there have actually been lots of groups out there that have actually done lots of work. So in my ward, St Luke's Millwall, have been doing food deliveries. I know in Limehouse there's been another group. So there's actually a lot of groups out there that haven't got all of the public acclaim. They've done lots of good work. Sister Christina, what she does is slightly unique in terms of its hot meals they're delivering on a pretty regular basis, whereas the other groups tended to be more delivering food, which then people then kind of cook at home. But, this is another example of kind of like a surprise, because the Meals on Wheels service, we would have only found out last year that it was going to end. And again, it didn't kind of go through a very formal, structured process. It's kind of like, councillors, are you aware that it's closing? And then you're trying to find out what's happening and what the service is doing and the reasons. At the same time, the service is actually closing. So we had a very good overview and scrutiny committee meeting where we were trying to explore what was going on. Basically, what we were told is that at that point, there was only 160 users in the whole Tower Hamlets, and it just wasn't economic anymore. And what we were trying to find out is what the right solutions were. But it was too late because the decision had already been made to close it down. So, and I think that model of working probably wasn't sustainable, but that doesn't mean there weren't other models that might have worked. So, one example I know in Wapping, Hussey's the Butchers, they do a delivery service of cooked food, and that works really well in Wapping. It's not particularly expensive and it is affordable. So that area is kind of covered by another solution. And I think that was the missing bit, is not really going into any detail about what other alternatives out there. And it may well be, actually, let's just give Sister Christine X £1,000 a year, and that will then cover the Poplar area and maybe the Isle of Dogs. And that kind of at least covers part of the service. But what happens, we just shut the service down.
Yes, I mean, it does seem at the time there were quite some horror stories, weren't there, of people who'd relied on the delivery of the hot meals. I know there was one person made a great fuss at the time. Her elderly relative had just been given a list of local shops, which you couldn't quite work out what was going on. And she seemed entirely sincere, but there must have been some mixed messages. I know we covered it in East London News, and then we asked the council what was going on, and they sent us a statement from the mayor, which I'm not sure clarified a great deal. Because you wonder, how is it that the service was run down to the extent that it was only serving 150 people? Do we have only 150 frail elderly people in the borough? No, we don't. We have more than that. So how were people missing out? That was the problem there. But anyway, that was that. So good. Right. Well, Sister Christine, I think we've got you another signatory for your petition there. Anybody else who's listening, you can go to the East London News website and get a link through. It's one of our more recent stories. So, right, I think we've probably exhausted the topic of car parking. And you were expressing your concern about Canary Wharf. Do you know if any of the... there's been a lot of retail companies have announced job losses and partial closures and going into administration and so forth recently. Is any of that affecting us in Tower Hamlets, or is that unclear at the moment?
Anecdotally, I am picking up that lots of the restaurants or the fast food places are going to shut down, because there used to be 140,000 workers there every day who would be buying their lunches and some of their dinners there. And most of that trade has now gone. So anecdotally, I'm hearing that a lot of the restaurants at Canary Wharf won't reopen. I don't know how true that is, but again, that depends on how quickly the workers return, or if they return. And again, hearing different things from different people. But I think it's pretty clear that more people will be working from home in the future than they have in the past, and therefore the demand for office space will be impacted.
You see, my great worry is that we're going to be left with Canary Wharf. It's just a great big white elephant. And we will have lost we gave up, 70 hectares of our borough for that business centre to be built. And, maybe we would have been better off with affordable housing being built on that site. But there's
possibility that, that we might convert some of those offices into residential, maybe not the highest quality. But I can imagine the Canary Wharf Group are thinking about some of those options. And I certainly like, for example, North Quay, there's a new planning application for the North Quay site, which is just north of the Crossrail station. And that's for a hybrid scheme. And it's entirely possible that might be built completely as different forms of residential. So I think Canary Wharf Group are kind of thinking, same at Wood Wharf, again, they've got the ability to flex between office and residential. I think the future of the estate is more residential than office. And Canary Wharf Group will adapt, but it's going to be difficult for them.
Well, this is it. I mean, I do quite often walk along that the southern quay of whatever dock it is, Millwall Dock, I think, and look up. And I had been thinking, I haven't seen these bits of Canary Wharf before. And then it dawned on me, I was actually looking at built bits of Wood Wharf.
Yeah.
For anyone who's not on the island and doesn't know, I mean, obviously most people in the borough will know of Canary Wharf. And there's a patch of land to the southeast of the Canary Wharf site called Wood Wharf, which is just being built on and ultimately could be as big as Canary Wharf again, I think. I mean, it's certainly very large. But this is what worries me. If you look at a site like Wood Wharf and then look at a site like maybe the Smuda and St John's, there must be some sort of equivalence of size. And we've got low-rise buildings, we've got a mix of buildings, and we've got a community as a result. And in those sort of series of tower blocks, even if you had affordable housing, would you get a community in those? I mean, are we just putting people in sort of high-rise rabbit hutches? Is it suitable, these conversions?
So that will be, well, so if we're converting office space, that's going to be very interesting because the reputation of converting office space into residential in the UK is pretty poor. But then having said that, you know, Canary Wharf Group have historically traded on a reputation for quality. So if anybody could deliver it better than other people, I would trust Canary Wharf Group to do that. Also depends on who owns it, because not all the buildings in Canary Wharf actually are owned by Canary Wharf Group. Some of them have been bought out. Wood Wharf, for example, you know, up to 3,600 homes could be built on that site. And if there is a continuing demand for homes there, they will get built out. But I do have concerns about other buildings, you know, the quality of them and the maintenance and the upkeep of them. And I am worried about slums basically being developing in some of the old, well, but when I say old, I mean 10-year-old buildings in the area.
Yes. I mean, I remember, I don't know if you are in touch with this issue at all. You probably are, but I remember when Timber Wharves was built on the Isle of Dogs, and it was a showcase estate, and it was, you know, showed you how run down all the council estates were. Look at this wonderful housing association quality product. And it took 10 years for it to get as run down as anything the council was in charge of. And and I used to go around there, you know, every couple of years, and you could see the deterioration in it. So there's something about the management of an area, not just the actual building of it. So maybe the council will keep an eye on that. We are coming towards the end of our time, Andrew, so we'll shortly be able to let you go. But I think maybe we could just have a quick word about old, what's his name, the West Ferry Printers site. Seeing as we're talking about homes and that, I mean, one of the issues of concern for the council was there wasn't enough affordable housing in it. And I think probably your postbag is probably the same as every other councillor in Tower Hamlets. Far fewer complaints about unaffordable housing than about affordable housing, certainly in terms of need. So do you think that maybe the COVID situation might actually force a bit of a rethink on that West Ferry Printers site? Do you think we'll get a bit more affordable housing in like the council wanted?
So we were initially offered 35% of affordable housing on the site. The mix wasn't quite policy compliant in terms of the mix of 1, 2 and 3 beds, and also in terms of the affordability. And then last year, after the appeal was submitted, Richard Desmond dropped it from 35 down to 21%, which is one of the things that we objected to, but Robert Jenrick sort of allowed, and obviously that decision has now been quashed. So a new decision will be made by a new minister. We think there'll be a new inspectorate, so there'll be another public meeting. Oh goodness! So that's another £1 million cost for everybody, because each one of those, you know, that's the last time we did this, it cost the council £400,000, and it cost. Well, because basically you have a room full of barristers and planning experts for 2 to 3 weeks. So the council had 2 barristers. The applicant had 2 barristers. You have to hire lots of technical experts to have all of the arguments. And, you know, the total cost of the council was approximately £400,000 and the GLA was £138,000 to do that appeal, because, you know, those experts, they charge, you know, £1,000, £1,500 a day, and they're sat in a room for 2 to 3 weeks arguing about all of the detail of this. So I think we're going to be doing that exercise again. But clearly, yes, the expectation will be is that Richard Desmond will have to improve. He'll have to pay the community infrastructure levy, the £48 million, because that's automatic. And it's the affordable housing percentage that will be the bargaining point, I think, or the main subject of debate. So, and I just did another FOI to the ministry this morning, trying to dig up detail of why he made the decision in the way that he did. So,
indeed, that is an area which possibly does need someone to pursue. So that's all well to the good. Well, Andrew, look, it's been excellent having you on, and it's been so useful that you've have so many facts at your fingertips. Even if you've made me feel I'm utterly in the wrong business if I'm not earning £2,000-3,000 a day on being an expert witness somewhere, but I'm not sure what I'm an expert on. So Jill of all trades, I think, myself. So I will actually just run through the East London headlines before we close the programme. But certainly for the moment, I'd like to thank you very much for appearing, and maybe you'll appear as one of our guests again in the future, and we can talk about things more broadly. So thank you very much, Andrew.
Okay, thank you.
I'll let you go. I've no idea how you do go.
In the studio, so hopefully I'll just disappear from your screens.
Right. Okay, right. That was Councillor Andrew Wood from Canary Wharf ward, and that was an interesting discussion on parking. So I hope people who haven't heard it live are actually listening back to it, because I think it was very informative. Just have a quick run through what else is going on in East London. Tower Hamlets have just announced that they've got they've finished 24 new council homes on Stepney Green on an old car park. So that's nice. Obviously, there's still a way to go, and there's obviously controversy around them having opted to build council homes, which of course are potentially subject to right to buy. So it could be a bit of a like a revolving door. Council homes coming on tap and going out of the stock again. But fingers crossed, that would at least add something to the council stock that can be let. Tower Hamlets has announced that it's going to reopen its leisure centres, but in a phased way. And also we had a cabinet last week, which we must write up and put on East London News. There was a lot of very, very disturbing stories came out of that cabinet meeting about the financial problems the council is having, and of course what it might do about it. We've already said that council workers are having or have had their terms and conditions cut back in the new contract scheme called Tower Award, and Unison are on strike. All the unions have voted against the proposals, and Unison are on strike, have been on strike for 2 3-day sessions, and are having a third next week. Again, we'll put information up on East London News if people would like to support that. So, given all that news was going on in Tower Hamlets, I thought it was remarkable that we didn't have any any mention of Eid on the Tower Hamlets News website. It seems we're drifting further and further away from that kind of multiculturalism. We would have thought certainly one of the other East London boroughs managed to mention everybody. So we're getting a question through about the petition and where that can be signed. If you go onto the East London News website, I know it's difficult to Google East London News if you haven't got the site bookmarked. So bookmark it, because when you Google East London News, sometimes you get East London News. But Google East London News, get through to www.eastlondonnews.co.uk. I think that's our website. And it's one of the most recent stories there. It's being suggested that, yes, we can put the link under the video comments. I just don't have my internet open at the moment, so that will just take a little moment to set up. But we'll post it on the Vodcast website. While I'm talking about some other things, that was Tower Hamlets. The link is coming. Hackney are tackling the question about Broadway Market, which they are reopening as a borough. They're responsible for Broadway Market, and that's going to be open again on the 8th of August. It's got a number of safety measures coming in, and hopefully business will get going there soon. The other disappointing news for the Hackney Mayor is that the people who run what they call the Museum of the Home, which I think used to be called the Jeffrey Museum, they've got a statue outside of Sir Robert Jeffrey, and it has been suggested that maybe that wasn't appropriate, as he did have links with the slave trade, to keep that statue there. And unfortunately, the people who run the museum have decided that that is what they want to do. And the Mayor of Hackney have said he's disappointed by that, although the Borough of Hackney, their review of their own statues is continuing. Also, in terms of money, and this again is quite a contrast with Tower Hamlets, they have managed to find £190,000, which they're now offering up to the voluntary and community sector to bid for grants. And let me see if there's any way that I can manage to comment on the podcast. If you're watching this on the Vodcast Facebook page, then all sorts of things happen when you press that bit. So here we are. Well, with any luck, I'm pasting the link. There we go. If you're watching this on the Facebook site, the Vodcast Facebook site, you have now see in the comments the link to the petition. That you can go on there and sign that. And don't just sign it, please share it as well. Apart from that, if you don't share it immediately, you'll just get endlessly bothered by change.org asking you to share it, but also share it because it will make other people sign it as well. And then we've done our bit to support that concern, which is excellent. Now, Newham, I'm going to go on to Newham now. We've just a quick run through what's going on in the various boroughs, so everyone gets a bit of a look in. Newham did manage on its website to mention Eid al-Adha, and in fact they opened some of their parks to local mosques so that Eid prayers could be held with the social distancing that extra space allows. So they took a very positive step. As I said, nothing from Tower Hamlets, which just seems very odd. And Newham also, and this is interesting, they're going to have a by-election in their East Ham Central ward because a councillor has had to resign because of a change in her work circumstances, as I understand it. But because of the COVID emergency legislation, that vacancy will not be filled until the 6th of May 2021. So we're going to have to go a whole sort of 8 months with a vacancy in that ward, no councillor there. So if there's any other councillors thinking of resigning, just remember there won't be any by-elections until May 2021 at the earliest. You will be leaving your constituents without representation. I didn't know that myself. I think that's quite interesting. Out in Barking and Dagenham, the news is quite hard to find, but again, it's quite useful. The big thing in Barking and Dagenham is that 2 residents have been caught fly tipping and fined. So that was a Redbridge concern, but it's now sort of petered over to Barking and Dagenham. And the borough's also announced zero tolerance of illegal gatherings. They've been very firm on that. A message that's not really coming across in the other boroughs. Barking and Dagenham have also on their website got a reminder to businesses. There are business grants available until the 28th of August. That's a national scheme, but you can find out details of it there. So if your business is in need of a bit of a cash injection to keep going, go onto the Barking and Dagenham site and check out the government scheme they're referring to. And both Barking, Dagenham and Redbridge are fast-tracking their procedures for cafes, restaurants to use bits of the pavement or bits of open space for their customers. So that's welcome responsiveness from those councils. And Redbridge are also consulting on public space protection orders. I did read the article. It didn't really leave me any either clearer, but if you live in Redbridge, you might want to check that out. So that's going to be it for this evening. We've just tipped over the hour. I hope you agree that was an interesting discussion on parking. So do give us some feedback, put some comments on the Vodcast Facebook page. We did intend 2020 to be more of a review of the news, but that's been a lot more difficult to arrange than we had thought, because these interesting topics keep coming up, and to give them proper time, we've sometimes had to avoid the more general review of the news. I have a bit more sympathy now for those news programmes on the radio where they say, oh, we've got to rush on to the next item. We could have covered parking in 5 minutes and then gone on, but it would have been quite rushed. So if you are interested in having a sort of generally left of centre review of the news across East London as a community service, then maybe get in touch, go on that Vodcast Facebook page, put a comment down and let us know what you feel you would want. Thank you to Councillor Mia for ringing in. Thank you again to Councillor Wood for appearing. And that's it for today. And we'll be back again 10 o'clock next Tuesday with a review of the news. So thank you for watching. Please come back next Tuesday. Good night.